Okay, so lesson 11.1.1 is volume of prisms. So we're going to be talking about volume and surface area during this chapter. So volume is something that you've done in your past math life. So you may know volume as length times width times height, but it only works for rectangular prisms, and we're looking at general prisms, any prism. So there's a bunch of situations that could happen. So it says, let's look at a formula for the volume of any prism. So first of all, before we can do that, we're going to define a prism. So this is kind of that fancy terminology. So we're going to say that is a solid with two faces and those are called bases that are congruent and parallel. And we'll talk through all this in just a minute. Lateral faces connect the bases. We're also going to say lateral faces are always rectangles. And then one more thing that we're going to put is just kind of a side note. It's not the actual definition. So I'm just going to draw a star here, and we're going to say base does not, so let's write it large, always mean bottom. Okay, so let's break this down. A solid, so we're thinking like three-dimensional, so 3D, and it says two faces. So I don't know why they call the surfaces on the outside the faces, but they do, called bases. So in the case of, let's go to one of these. So like this shape and this shape right here, these triangles are the bases because they're congruent, so they're the same shape and same size and parallel. So if I were to take those two triangles and slide them right where they are, they would never touch each other. They would just slide in space and never touch. So that's bases. And then the other part is lateral faces connect the bases. So lateral faces that are connecting the bases are this connects those two purple bases, this connects those bases, and this connects it. They are all three rectangles. So sometimes it's hard to see the difference. There's one of them. Here's another one. And then the one all the way in the front, and I'll go sideways. This is the third one. So those are our lateral faces, and they will always be rectangles. One thing that people mess up a lot is the base does not always mean it's on the bottom. In this case, the base is on the bottom, but in this case, the base is not on the bottom because the base are these triangles because they are parallel and congruent. So you can move any of these shapes around and the base doesn't have to stay on the bottom. It can be anywhere. But that is a common mistake that happens, so we want to keep that in mind for the future. So now number one, it says, let's break down our prism into parts to better derive a formula for volume. Below is a tower built by stacking 5 identical layers of the shape below on top of each other. What is the volume of the tower? How can you tell without building the shape? Use the blocks provided. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that, so we'll just do it together. So first of all, one layer is up here. That's our layer. So let's figure out how many blocks are in that layer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 blocks. So 7 blocks in one layer. So if there's 7 blocks in one layer, and it sounds like there are 5 layers, so 5 layers, that means that there are 5 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, they'd be the same height and everything, but that's just a visual to help you know what's going on. So if there's 5 layers of that, so it's like stacked on top of each other, we are going to do 7 5 times. So 7 times 5, which is going to be 35 blocks total. And the way we did that in words is we took the first layer, I'm just going to say 1 layer, times the number of layers. So times number of layers. Sorry, I did not plan for that part. So that is volume kind of in as a gist for you. So we're not going to be able to put it on our formula sheet yet. It says now put it on your toolkit, but I will write it down here. So we're going to write V equals, and then 1 layer, since we can't just count blocks here. So if we go down, go back. If we can't count blocks, like here we could, but here we can't count blocks. So 1 layer is really representing the base. So we're going to say the area of the base, so volume equals area of base, and we're just talking 1 base, times the number of layers of that base. And I'm going to kind of box this to tell myself it's important. I know you don't have highlighters at your desk, but I'm going to highlight it for you. So we're keeping that in mind, and we'll go through each of these and kind of talk about all those pieces. Before we do, we're going to do one more question related to this. It says, Pillar built a tower by stacking identical layers on top of each other. So kind of what we were doing here. If her tower uses a total of 312 blocks, so 312 blocks is our result, just like 35 was our result. And if the bottom layer is 13 blocks, so 1 layer is 13 blocks, how tall is her tower? So if I'm blocking those 13s, so those 13s are getting stacked up until I hit 312. Well, it's not realistic for me to sit there and like write all that out. So instead, an easier way to do that would be to say, okay, we know the volume is the area of the base, which was 13, times the number of layers, which we don't know. So I'm just going to call that times y, because if I write times x, it's going to look like, it still looks like it here. We're going to write, I'll put a dot, times y equals 312. So actually I already have my volume, so I can cancel that part out over there. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 13 to get how many layers. So that is going to be 24 layers, which represents the height of her tower. So 24 is our height. And in this case, it's talking about blocks. So 24 blocks tall. All right, so now let's practice some. So some of this practice we're going to do together, and then the rest of it you're going to do on your own. Remember that the notes and the homework are all together. So this is your homework and notes all put into one. I will put the answer key on Schoology, and I will also put the answer key on the board, but note that the answer key isn't going to have all of the work shown for some of those problems because it's got practice. But just as usual, we'll go over this stuff on Monday if you have any questions. So practice questions, it says find the volume of each prism below. Round 2 decimal places if needed. Don't forget units. So let's get better about that. And then let's just remind ourselves, volume equals area of base times number of layers. Now, length times width times height only works for rectangular prisms. It doesn't work for everything. So I like to stick with this because this represents all the situations instead of having to remember all these other formulas that have to go with it. So for number 1, first I determine what is my base. So remember, bases are congruent and parallel. So I know that this right here is my base. And I like to kind of color it in. It's up to you. But I'm going to count how many blocks are in my base. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 blocks are in my base, so that's my area of my base. And then how many layers of my base do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6 times 4 will give me my volume, which is 24, and then blocks cubed, or you can think like units cubed, however you want to write that. Okay, so on the next one, we've got some options here because rectangular prisms are kind of special in that anywhere could be a base and you could still get the right answer. So I'm just going to do it as the base is the bottom in this case. It's not always that case for every situation, but here we can do that. So my volume is going to be the area of my base. So this situation, I'm not counting blocks anymore. I am finding the area of a rectangle. So to find the area of that rectangle, I'm going to do, oh, that's not 12, base times height. So 14 times 5. And then to find the number of layers, they're not separated like these ones were before. So we kind of have to think about it as I'm stacking up, and to stack up this way, I'm stacking 9 high. So yes, it is length times width times height for just this situation. So volume is 630 units cubed when I multiplied. All right, let's go to the next page. We're going to do a couple more together. So number 3, looking at this, again, we're thinking our formula is volume equals area of base times number of layers. And when we say layers, we're saying layers of the base. So in this shape, what, on number 3, which shapes are the bases? Are they triangles or rectangles? So we're thinking things that would never touch each other. So for example, things that would touch each other. This rectangle here and this rectangle here do intersect each other right down here where those had those 2 lines. So those would be considered not parallel. We're used to saying things are parallel in terms of just lines, but you can also talk about shapes. So this triangle and this triangle would never touch each other. They are parallel. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to color this one in just because there's numbers on that, but I could transfer that information down, like this is 3 here, this is 4 right here. We know that if this is 9, then all these other pieces are 9 also. So you can transfer that information, and sometimes you do have to, but keep that in mind. So I'm going to find the area of my base. Now in this case, my base is a triangle. So because it's a triangle, I'm going to use a different formula for the area of the base than I did on number 2 because that was a rectangle. So going here, I'm going to say, okay, area of a triangle is either 1/2 times base times height or base times height divided by 2. You know my personal preference is 1/2, but that doesn't have to be your preference. So I'm going to write volume equals 1/2. Now here's the deal. You got to be careful. The area of the base and the base of the base are 2 different things. The area of the base is doing the area of this. The base of the base is looking at this shape because it's the base and finding the base of that. It can get confusing if you go too fast. It is very easy if you take it slow. So to find the area of the base, I'm going to do 1/2 times the base of the base, which is 3 from right here, and then times the height of the base, which is 4. And note that, yes, technically the number of layers is the height of the shape, but if I say that, it does kind of conflict and get a little confusing with the height of the base too, because like the height of the prism and the height of the base. So it's all kind of sounding the same, so finding ways to separate it is useful. So we have 1/2, 3 times 4 is the area of the base, and times the number of layers. So how many layers of triangles do I have to do to get from the top to the bottom in this case? So to do that, I have 9 layers, so times 9. So when I pop all that into my calculator, I get the volume equals 54 centimeters cubed. It's cubed because we're 3-dimensional, 3D, so we are cubing it. All right, so let's go to number 5, and then we'll do some other ones. So you're going to have to do number 4 on your own. We'll go to number 5. So number 5, this is a situation where base is not on the bottom because I've got this triangle here and then stacking all the way back to a triangle that you don't see back there. So my stacking is from front to back now. So that's different. It stacks like this instead of up, down. So we're still going to do area of base times the number of layers. So for us, our base is a triangle. So we're going to, sorry, that scribbling was just really unfortunate. So the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, and then times the number of layers is what we're putting in. So let's put our stuff in. Our base of our triangle is 5. So the base is 5, and the height is also 5, so times 5 of the triangle. And then we're zooming out and looking at how many layers. So we're layering this way. We're stacking front to back. And we're laying 6. So you can't just put random numbers in random places when you're solving these. So we have volume equals 75 feet cubed when you multiply all those pieces together. All right, let's see here. Let's go to number 6. Let's do that together. All right, number 6. So we need to figure out what are we stacking. So we're stacking the same exact thing. If I stack this item, I am stacking rectangles. So it should look like rectangles. See how this is scooching out? If it was rectangles, this would be what we have, not any of this over here. So that's not good. That's not the stacking I need. I need something to stack to be the same however I do it. So if I was stacking this item, it should be continuously slanting in that direction. But as you can see, this slants in the other direction, so that's a no. So I've tried to stack top, I tried to stack right, top to bottom, left to right. Those don't work. So front to back has to work. So front to back is a trapezoid. So we want volume equals area of base times number of layers. And you don't have to write this every time, but if we continue to talk about it, it'll help us remember it. And our base here is a trapezoid. So that might be something you have to look up the formula for on your orange toolkit. But I like to remember it again as like a triangle, but you have multiple bases. So 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times height, because it's 1/2 base times height, but you have 2 bases in a trapezoid. So I'm gonna label, I'll call this base 1, I'll call this base 2, and then I'll call this the height, because it makes that right angle right there. So that is the area of the base. So that is just this portion right here. So then I have to times by the number of layers. So let's start filling in our blanks here. So base 1 is right here. There's no number provided, but then I can go back here and say, okay, these should be exactly the same. So that's going to be a 4. So 1/2 parentheses 4 plus. And then base number 2 is right here, that's 8. And then times the height of the base. So the height of the base, which is 7. So see how easy it is when I'm just labeling things as I go versus like trying to pull pieces of the picture while I'm writing my formula, like literally plugging in the numbers. And then the number of layers. So if we're layering front to back, we're thinking about how do I get from the front to back? So how do I go this way? 3 represents going from the front to the back, that distance going there. So that's 3. Make sure you type everything in, including the parentheses, into your calculator, and you should be getting 126 feet cubed. And then let's go over to number 11. Let's pop to the next page. Let's go over to number 11. We'll do one more together, and then the rest of what has not been done, including things that I've already skipped, will be your responsibility. So number 11, again, volume equals area of base times number of layers. So in our case, we have to figure out what the base is. So we're thinking, how are we stacking the same shape? And that shape has to be congruent in both spaces and have to be parallel. So the things that we could be stacking are rectangles or triangles, and those rectangles are touching, so we want the triangles. So that is my base. Remember, since it's a triangle, the formula for the area of a triangle is 1/2 times base times height. So I am replacing this part with this, and then times number of layers gets put back in there. So this is how it's getting filled in. So the area of the triangle is going to be 1/2 times the base of the triangle, so that's 3, times the height. We have to be careful. This is the hypotenuse, this is the height. So I don't have that right now, so I need to find it. And then times the number of layers. So I'm layering from top to bottom in this case. So to get my layers, I've got 8 of those. So we have to find height. So we're going to go back in here, zoom back in, and look at what's going on here. So looking at our triangle, if I just take that out, because I need just that piece, I have 3, I have 5, that is 90, and I'm looking for the height. So I have 2 sides, I'm looking for the third, and I have a right triangle, so I can use Pythagorean theorem to solve. Remember, C has to be the hypotenuse. So it doesn't matter about A and B, but C has to be the hypotenuse. So 3 squared plus h squared equals 5 squared. So now we've got 9 plus h squared equals 25 squared, or sorry, 9 plus h squared equals 25. And then to get h squared alone, we're going to take away 9 from both sides. I'm going to move up here. And we get h squared equals 16. And then we're going to square root both sides to undo squaring. So h equals 4. So now I'm going to go back and plug it in. Volume equals 1/2 times 3 times 4 times 8, because that 4 is the only thing we needed to plug in. So our volume is going to be, once we type all that into the calculator, 48, and there's no units provided, so we're going to write units cubed, just a U, or you can write the word units. Okay, so now it's your job to do the rest of these. Remember, answer key will be online and also on the sideboard. Have a good weekend.